Welcome to the Co-Host Bros Podcast, where we break down everything short-term rentals, entrepreneurship, and building a profitable hospitality business. Whether you're a host, investor, or property manager, we share real strategies, real insights, and real experiences to help you scale smarter and grow faster. Let's dive in.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Co-Host Bros Podcast. My name is Matt Codd. I'm here with the one and only Austin Spitz, and today we have a special guest, Mr. Noble Crawford. What is going on, guys?
Hey, what's good, fellas? Appreciate y'all having me on today.
Man, I like your tone. It's just calm, cool, composed, collective, chill. Man, I'm not like that. I'm just too type A, go, 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 but I like the composure there.
Yeah, I'm pretty laid back guy, man. So, just go with the flow.
How you doing today, man?
Can't complain, man. Staying busy, which is a good thing. And, and still in the grind of my, what I do on the day to day. But other than that, life is good.
I hear you, man. Let's jump into it. So for those of us, our listeners that don't know exactly what you do, tell us how you kind of got into this space and what it is exactly that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, most people know me coming out of the kind of the Airbnb STR space. So my wife and I, we started a business or got into that space back in 2017 now. Yeah, 2017. And a couple of years into it, we kind of naturally started moving towards the direct booking, B2B type clientele. And part of that stemmed from my background in hospitality and that sort of thing. I did have a hospitality background, worked in the hospitality space for years. And so we transitioned early on in the business to direct bookings before it was really even a thing. And, of course, COVID happened. And, because we had made some, transitionary moves prior to COVID, we actually grew during COVID, whereas a lot of people were kind of folding and losing their business. We actually grew during COVID. And then in the midst of that, we kind of carved out a bit of it, what I would say is a unique niche, in that we started implementing, leveraging our inventory or our properties for government contracts, right? And then when we flipped that switch on, then it was just up and to the right after that. And we've been doing that ever since, and, had the good fortune of now showing other people how to engage in that space as well. And so the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, for sure. So when you say government contracts, what does that mean? Like who are we talking to here, and what kind of client?
Yeah, so typically that is providing lodging and accommodations for any of the 500 plus federal agency and their personnel, federal contractors, federal employees, service members, anyone that will fall under that quote unquote like government space. And so, essentially the government pays a per diem, to people that fall into that category. And it's a nightly per diem. And so with that per diem, obviously they, just like everyone else, needs a place to sleep, whether they're away on training, away on official business, where you're working on a project, whatever the case is. And so we provide inventory for those use cases.
So that's cool. So I personally am a government employee, so I'm somewhat familiar with the per diem rates and things like that. Do a lot of corporate housing, things like that. So I think that's pretty cool. So I do know though that some of the government rates are real low. So are you getting a decent amount out of those contracts? I mean, they're usually like 3-month contracts, huh?
Oh, no. Some of them are even shorter than that. Some of them Depending on what you're looking at, it could be just for like a few nights. But there are contracts that go up to 3 years, even 5 years. And so, yeah. So they can have some longevity to them. And then everything in between. And so as far as the rate goes, so obviously you would know that the rate is determined, it's market specific, it's region specific. So it's the GSA lodging per diem. People that want to find out what that is, they can simply Google it, GSA lodging per diem in their city or zip code. It'll tell you what that rate is. Kind of the floor for most like secondary, tertiary markets is for this fiscal year is 110 a night. And so if you can find inventory that does not exceed that amount, that typically falls below that amount, then the spread is what you keep, right? So that's typically how it works.
Could you give me an example of like a situation of how this would play out in life and when someone would specifically use your services?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I'll give you a case study example of one of our first deals. So let me give you a little bit of context first. Prior to us jumping into the short-term rental space in 2017, I had left my previous W-2 back in 2014. In that job, I was in technology sales. I was commission technology sales. And one of the verticals that I was required to, do business in was the federal government. So that's where I cut my teeth on federal contracts. So part of my role was to because it was a fairly new company, get our company in a position to obtain some of these federal technology contracts, right? So that's where I learned the process of federal procurement, okay? So then fast forward into this new business, and at one point, a couple of years in, I have this light bulb moment. I'm like, wait a second, why am I not engaging in this, government contracting, with these STRs? It's just a different service, really. Right. But the process is very similar. Right. And so, like I was saying earlier, once we turned that switch on, it just took off. And so one of our first deals out of the gate was I had identified a big defense contractor, big Fortune 500 company, and they were holding a defense contract. It's this big, huge, like, hundreds of millions of dollars defense contract, but it was kind of like an umbrella contract. So there's a lot of moving parts and stuff underneath the bigger umbrella, the larger contract. Well, one of those things was lodging. And so for this particular contract, this company was responsible for providing helicopter pilot and mechanic training and recertification. Okay. And so they were flying these helicopter pilots and mechanics into this area, and they were going through training and recertification. Well, the pilots, their training and recertification was for a month. So they were flying in and staying for a month. The mechanics was for 2 weeks. Okay. And so what we said was we engaged with this defense contractor. And we said, hey, we want to, we knew that they had a list of hotels that they were putting these people up at. Right. At the time, we had STR inventory. So we went to them and said, hey, we want to provide our inventory for these trainees and be on this same list of these hotels. Right. And so, and of course, they once they saw that, hey, this is a superior product. If you're looking at a short-term rental, mid-term rental, the product is just better than a hotel room, just hands down.
For sure.
So we were able to get on that list. Okay. So then fast forward, these pilots start coming in at 1 month intervals. So we had, at the time, we had like 4 or 5 1-bedroom. We had 5. Let me see, how many do we have? We had 4 or 5 1-bedroom properties. And so we were hosting the pilots in 1 month intervals at these properties. And so the GSA rate at the time was $167 a night. Okay. So if you do the math, 167 times 30 is $5,010 a month. Okay. And so $5,010 a month for 1 bedroom, the rent was only like $1,485. The couple of $100 in utilities and expenses and stuff like that. And the rest of that was profit. So it was a lot of profit per door. It was actually 5 of those 1 bedroom. So that one was grossing like $25K a month just for the 5 1-bedrooms. But here's the kicker. The mechanics were coming in 2-week intervals. Okay. So because they were coming in 2-week intervals, we said, hey, we're going to put them in 2-bedroom, 2-bath units with a shared common living and common kitchen. And we're going to charge that $167 a night, not once, but twice, because there's 2 heads in there and there's a second bath. Okay. So that $167 a night turns into not 5,010, but 10,020. Right. Because of 2-bedroom, 2-bath. Then And so we have 4 of those. So those are grossing $40K. So between the 9 doors, those are grossing $65K a month. And the profit margin is stupid. Okay. And that was that. And to Matt, to your point earlier, that was a 5-year contract. Right. And so, and the reason we like these so much is because, once you're in the contract, you're in it for the longevity of the contract. And then it just pays you every month. It's like the gift that just keeps on giving, right? Month after month after month. And so it's a very high cash flow, high profit margin, niche, if you will, right? It's like midterm rental on steroids, right? And so we said, hey, we like this, right? And we found another one up in far north Dallas. The second time that we did it, we actually got the contract first and then leveraged the contract to go get the doors to support it, because we didn't have the doors for that one like we did the first one, right? And so that's a different conversation when you're, and this is all multifamily, by the way. So this is multifamily apartment doors, apartment inventory. So we were arbitraging these. We did not own these or anything. We were arbitraging. But it was a different conversation on the second one. We were taking a federal contract to them and saying, hey, we have, a guaranteed contract here, that we need to supply inventory for this agency. Do you want to partner with us in this endeavor, or we can go to your next door to your competitor? Right. It's just a different conversation. And so that was our upstart, providing inventory for federal contracts. And it just took off from there.
That's crazy. So, I've done it so many times and I've always like, oh, let me find the cheapest hotel. Let me find this. Let me find that. And you're like, it's like arbitrage midterm, like on steroids, like together. So that's crazy. Are you to the point to where it's like a government employee searching for a place to stay, you'll pop up in their program to where they see like those places to stay?
Good question. So for that to happen, my company would have to be what's called the GSA schedule. Okay. So if you're familiar with GSA schedule, the Government Services Administration, it's essentially like a buyer's catalog, if you will, is probably the best way to explain it. So different agencies can go to the GSA schedule, and as long as their threshold of spend is not over a certain amount, they can go and just order things off the GSA schedule, including lodging and accommodations and stuff. So we're not on the GSA schedule, so they can't just arbitrarily go out and get inventory from us. But we obtain our revenue through the contracts that we solidify, and those contracts are ink deals with different agencies. If that makes sense.
So you spend more time researching things that are going to be happening in that area to where there's a huge contract and lodging's included, and then you do what you can to try to secure that lodging aspect of that contract.
Close. Yeah, very close. So the only difference is we do not limit it to just our immediate area. Right. So with that first 2 examples, it just so happened to be that those were in our backyard. But we actually open it up to the entire U.S., right? Because there's just stuff you never know when something's going to drop in a particular market, how large it's going to be, what the quantity requirement is going to be. And because we understand, coming from the short-term rental space, we understand operating remotely, as a remote host, like it's not too different. It's not too indifferent, right? And so we'll chase projects all over the country. So I'm in one right now with some partners that's in San Diego. I'm here in Dallas-Fort Worth. That was in San Diego. And that was a 300-door contract that we won last summer. That was large, very, right? So yeah, it could be anywhere in the country.
So when you're saying you're arbitraging these units, are you saying like you're signing a lease? Your company is signing a lease and then offsetting it, renting it, right? So like if you're going to sign a lease for $1,000 for this unit, but you're going to rent it out for $3,000, right? So the asset's not necessarily owned; it's just you're running your business that way.
Correct. And part of the reason that is now in this particular space, there's different types of accommodations, right? So obviously, most often what agencies are accustomed to are hotel rooms. Okay. And we have a strategy for actually providing those as well. But hotel rooms, multifamily, and then of course, single family. Well, more often than not, when the government has a need, especially if it's contract based, it's in bulk. It requires a large amount of something or several of something. So it's no different for accommodations and lodging and stuff. They need several doors or several rooms. And so because of that, multifamily is easier to, to make it work than single family inventory. Because if they need 20 doors or 20 homes or whatever the case is, unless you just happen to own a subdivision in a specific market that has 20 homes sitting in the same area, like that's not ideal. It's not common, right? That's few and far between. And so multifamily is a much better fit for a lot of these opportunities. And because it is multifamily and we just don't happen to own the complex, it's arbitrage play.
Okay, gotcha. So why do you like your method versus like a traveling professional's method versus like corporate housing, for example? Like what are some of the maybe the advantages of the way that you do your business versus, things like Furnish Finder and stuff like that?
Yeah, so we've done pretty much, if you can name the B2B vertical, we've done it, right? We've played in it and we've executed on it. But this one, so we like this one for a number of reasons. So part of which is this is very much what I call a blue ocean model. Okay. And so what do I mean? So unlike in the STR, MTR space, like we're not going after the same guest demographic. We're not competing with other hosts for the same type of guest, right? We're not competing for transient guests. We're not competing for the same healthcare, workers, the same insurance, displaced insurance. We're not competing for them, right? We're, comparatively, with traditional STRs, we're not worried about like what's going on with the Airbnb algorithm. Did they change their rules and requirements? Like we don't worry about that. We don't worry about marketing, right? We don't have to worry about promoting and marketing and pushing our brand and building brand presence and all that. Like we don't worry about any of that, right? Regulations, because, more often than not, with the exception of the hotels, these stays are 30 days plus. So we're not worried about regulatory jurisdictional regulations and things like that, right? And so that's one of the reasons why we like this model. The second reason is that the profit margins are off the charts. Okay, they far exceed by a large degree, or they can what you can get, and even some of your best, midterm rental insurance, bookings. And so, and then in addition to that, they can be substantially longer, right? Yeah, you can land a 7, 8, 9 month plus insurance booking, but they're not going to be a 3 or 5 year booking. You see what I'm saying? And so, and because they're so long, they don't require the same cadence of turns that other models require. So, we're not sending in cleaners like ever so often. Like they're more, it's more like a combination of midterm, long term almost, right? And they kind of self-manage because these people they're planted, they're in place, they're there for whatever purpose, for whatever period of time. And then the next one comes in, right? And so there's multiple reasons why we like this model.
Yeah. So something that comes to my mind when you're saying all this, and I'm thinking about it, is like one thing that I also foresee, and I don't know this, but I'm just assuming, is the quality of the tenant because they're going through government contracts is probably going to be likelier a better tenant that's going to more likely take care of the place versus vacation people, right? Is that
That's
something that
exactly
you've
what I
kind of
was
seen?
thinking too. Like their job's on the line, they're not going to fuck the house up, right? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. 100%. And so like, Matt, federal employers and contractors and service members are vetted at a different level. They got a different, background screening, security checks and things like that than a traditional civilian type of traveler. Right. And so, so we're dealing with multifamily. So from a property management company's perspective, there's specific pain points that they have. Well, one of those pain points that they have is, well, who are you going to be putting on my property? Are they going to be disruptive to my typical 12-month tenant base, right? Are you going to be a burden on my staff? They have these different pain points. And once you can overcome those, then it's game on. And so one of those things they want to know is like, what is the quality of personnel that you're talking about putting into our community, right? And when we can explain to them, like, this person is vetted higher than you vet your own 12-month tenants, like that takes, that takes the pressure down. And so yeah, all of that's important.
So are you using are you leveraging Airbnb and OTAs at all, or is it more of like a direct booking thing? That you guys, how does that work?
Yeah. So once we kind of got into, once we initially got into the B2B space, we were doing all the things, even like now they're more common and known. So we were doing healthcare professionals, we were doing insurance. We do higher ed, right? Which was a play, and it's not student housing, it's staff housing. So that's the thing. We've in the last couple of years done aviation, which not a lot of people are doing, and so we've done all these different verticals. And as we've kind of grown that B2B business model, we eliminated we took our Airbnb listings down to now we have none. Everything is direct, right? The majority of it is contract based stuff, but everything is direct. We don't have any more inventory on Airbnb at all.
I think you'd have a lot of leverage, because if you go nail a contract at 300 doors and you go to an apartment with a lot of vacancy, or even let's just say that, with all the growth and building, apartments and things like that, you just go, look, I can fill this many doors for you for this X amount of time. Do you want that, at your market rate? And it's like, there's no lose for them. I'll take care of whatever's going on, and they get paid and you get paid. So, I feel like you have a lot of leverage when it comes to, versus a normal person calling and saying, hey, I want to corporate lease your apartment, right? And there's more risk involved too, right? Because what if it doesn't book, all that kind of stuff. I feel like there's a lot less risk for you. So what are you doing logistically with like furniture? Are you selling it? You have a warehouse? Like what do you do? If you got to go furnish like 20 apartments in Dallas, what do you do when they leave? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. Great question. So here's the thing. Because the government typically, more often than not, when they have a need, is a bulk of something, right? So the same with this inventory of rooms or doors. It's not advantageous for us to purchase that furniture. We rent it, and we put that price of the rental into what we're reselling it back to the government at, right? So the government is not only paying.
Oh, because they have a furniture rental budget too.
Well, so we pad that in. We take that expense and pad it back into the cost that we're going to charge them on a monthly basis, right? So really? Effectively, we're contacting the courts, the AFRs, all the big rental house companies, and we're renting that inventory. So all of those doors for the San Diego project, that's all rented inventory, because even though it's a 5-year contract, at the end of that contract, again, like you said, we don't want to be sitting on that. Yeah. We don't have to dispose of all of that and offload it and stuff like that. And because we can price in the expense of the cost of the rental furniture into that monthly rate that we're charging the government, it's just a no-brainer, right? So that's what we do.
So they own the furniture then?
It's rented. Nobody owns
company,
it.
Like a rent-a-center. Like you just, not that price. You get a better price, I'm sure, but
it's commercial furniture rental places.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's cool. So it's like you spend nothing besides your time getting these contracts, pretty much, and maybe deposits or whatnot.
Yeah. So the methodology. So I work with a number of students, and one of the strategies that I teach them is to go into these deals with very little, if any, out of pocket. Right. And so obviously the larger the deal size, the more, challenging that becomes. But what the methodology I teach is very common to what people do in the arbitrage space. So we look to negotiate those rents, right? We look for that first month's concession, if not 2 months, right? Because what we're bringing to them is we're bringing the consistent revenue for a long period of time and for multiple doors. So we're not the typical 12-month tenant that's coming in for a year and then leaving, right? We're doing multiple of something and for an extended period of time. And for that, we want certain concessions, right? So a lot of these complexes, they'll run like a first month's rent free type of special or something. So we want to take advantage of that. But then we want to get that security deposit either eliminated or reduced, right? So at the end of the day, your out of pocket is very little on the front end or sometimes nothing, right? And so, yeah.
So at what point is it at what point is it the contract versus the relationship, right? How important is relationships in this business with the people you're working with?
Very. Just like in any other industry, any other business model, relationships can be everything, right? So part of this, I usually look at it as two sides of one coin. So on the one side of the coin, there's the knowledge piece. Like most people aren't even aware this is a thing, right? So there's that, just being aware. And then the knowledge on how to execute these types of deals, right? But then the other side of the coin is relationship, right? So from the agency perspective, you need to know like who are the decision makers at these agencies that you need to be in front of, right? And then once you're in front of them, how to have that conversation, how to build that rapport, right? So that's one. And then like if you're dealing with property management companies, how to engage with them, how to, develop that relationship with them, because if they're larger property management companies like the national ones, there's probably a chance that you're going to do business with them multiple times in different locations, right? So you need to start to develop that relationship at the corporate level on down, right, to the regional level, so on and so forth. So relationships can be huge, right? Especially when you start to get into larger deals and stuff.
You guys are probably making fire on that San Diego deal, though, because the per diem's real high over there.
It was a $44 million contract. That's $44 million. That's ridiculous.
I mean, nobody's doing this, right? I mean, and I think that's part of the reason why Austin had you on. I heard you speak at a conference probably a couple years ago and heard you on a couple podcasts. I mean, if I say I'm just a normal person and say I want to go out there and try to go get me a government contract or a small one, right? 5-10 doors, like what would be the best approach for me to do something like that?
Good question. So a couple of things. There's some prerequisites, if you will, right? So one of them is going to be you need to have your company or your entity registered as a vendor, right, with the federal government, because that's the only way you can take advantage of these things. You have to be in their vendor database, right? And so the quick steps to do that, because you go through a website, it's an online registration. So it's SAM, like Uncle Sam, sam.gov, sam.gov. So that's the site. And you go through the process to register your entity. And once you're registered, then that avails and opens up all the opportunities that you can go after, right? And so if you're new to the space, and let's just say you have, maybe you've ran Airbnbs before, or maybe you're just a traditional real estate investor or a wholesaler or a flipper or whatever, that's fine, right? What you want to do is you want to find opportunities that are real estate based type of contracts, right? So the ones I focus on are centered around lodging and housing and accommodations and stuff like that. But there are other types also. There are construction contracts, right? There are property management contracts. Like if you name it, like the government buys it, right? Essentially. Yep. And so, so depending on what type you're looking for specifically to fall under real estate, there are industry codes that you can search by keyword. So you can go in to that same site, sam.gov, and you can search by keyword and find different contract opportunities. They're called solicitations. So you can find different contract opportunities. And then there's instructions they provide what's called a scope of work. And there's instructions in the scope of work about how to submit your bid and stuff like that. So that at a high level, that's kind of the process.
So at what point is there do you need to be, is this something like that you can do anywhere? So if you're first getting started, could you do this in another city? So say you lived in the country and you didn't live in the DFW area where all these people are traveling to. Is this something that you can successfully do remote, or is it more important, as you're getting started, you need to be there, show face and do it that way?
Yeah, good question. So you do not need to be local to the opportunity or to the contract. Whatever location it's in, you can definitely fulfill it and run it remotely. Again, depending on the size would depend on if it required you to have some boots on the ground type support or not, right? Also depending on the type of contract. You would be surprised at the number of contracts that happen in the most remote locations, right? I've seen 7-figure contracts in Iowa, right? In Nebraska, in the middle of nowhere, in Utah, so these contracts happen all over the country. And larger urban markets and small secondary markets as well, right? And so I usually teach my students to chase the contract opportunity, not so much try to find an opportunity that matches a specific location where they have existing inventory, because the likelihood of that happening is hit or miss. You never know when something's going to drop that's going to happen in your backyard. And if you're focusing on that, you're missing all the other 99% of opportunities happening around the country, right? And so I usually recommend chasing the opportunity regardless of where it's at in the U.S.
So the tenant calls you. Let's just say you're a small operator. The tenant calls you at 10 o'clock and says, "Noble, the toilet's clogged. What's going on?" That's not your role, right? Because that would be whoever's. I'm not as familiar with the arbitrage model, so
Yeah.
that wouldn't even fall. So maintenance and stuff like that, from a traditional property management perspective, falls on us to solve those problems. That's not even a problem you're solving, right?
Not necessarily. So it would depend, right? So, because a lot of these deals, again, now there are, and we can get into some single family opportunities as well, but most of these deals are going to be like multifamily type opportunities. And so in a situation like that, we kind of have a system down too. And so I'm not getting that call unless it just escalates to a certain level. But so a VA or somebody who's answering the phone at that hour or responding to a message or communication would get that. They would then, depending on the agreement or the scenario that we have with the property management company, they would then engage maintenance at the property to address the issue, which is more common because it's their community, or they would engage a maintenance personnel that is either an on-call or even through an app, like a handy.com or some one of those types of apps, depending on the urgency of it, right? And the hour that it happens and what our agreement is with the property, right? And so any number of those things could kick in to address whatever that issue is. More often than not, unless it's like a real urgent situation that requires somebody to come out at 3 a.m. It's going to be the following business morning type of scenario where somebody gets out there between 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. to, try to fix it, that sort of thing. And so you would handle that no differently than if you were local in that same city and you were at home and you weren't going over there yourself, but you were outsourcing that. Right. And so it just so happened it's remote. Right. Now, if you get into a much larger opportunity, maybe it's a 50, 75, 100 door deal. And then, maybe you need to bring in a 1099 person that is kind of like an on-call. Right. And they answer the phones whenever the phones ring. And this stuff happens very infrequently. Right. Because these people are there for longer periods of time. But they would answer the phone. They have a process in place, to handle specific issues, maintenance type things, whatever the case is. Right. So and then, that all of that stuff can be learned. Right. How to execute a one person or a small team in a remote location to, handle your property management.
My mind is blown. Like my head's smoking over here already. So step one is get yourself registered, find a contract, bid on the contract. If you get the contract, figure out the rest of it. Pretty much, right?
Yeah, and some of it is like, some of it is dependent on the contract. Like I said, so I'll give you an example. So I gave you an example of multifamily. So a single family scenario would be like, okay, so there's a contract with the Veterans Administration, for example. So these are fairly common. So the VA, they are responsible for kind of overseeing veterans that are getting like different medical treatments done, right, at the VA hospital. And so some VA contracts will come out where they're looking for single family inventory to place veterans per bedroom. So kind of like a pad split model where they're putting the veterans in the properties. Of 3 bedrooms, there's going to be 3 veterans in there, right? A 4 bedroom, 4 veterans, right? And so they're looking for 3 or 4 or 5 different single family properties that are in a certain proximity to the VA hospital because the veterans have to go back and forth to the hospital post-treatment type stuff, right? And so in those scenarios, you could be dealing directly with a property owner. If you're going to arbitrage it, you could rent the property yourself. If you if you land the contract and you have time to take it down in a purchase, you can certainly do that. So there's just a couple of different ways that can be handled in terms of single family. But you're responsible for much more on a single family than you would be a multifamily. There's no built-in maintenance team there, right? So you got to make sure the yard's mowed. You got to make sure like the air filters change, like all the things that come with it. Owning and managing a single family house fall on you, right? But now, not only now are you're charging the federal government per person staying in that property, right? So that's going to be exponentially more than than a traditional 12-month tenant that you're putting in that property, right? So it can be very lucrative, even though you have some additional maintenance things you need to take care of. So that's an example. A third example, and this is one I really like, are hotels. Okay, so I teach this model called hotel brokering. Okay. So agencies are already used to doing business with hotels, right? They get the nightly rate. They already know what it is. The hotel already knows what the GSA rate is, and they're going to charge them that. Well, when they put out a contract, some contracts call for hotel space, and that's totally fine because I teach my students how to actually bid on those hotel deals. And effectively what you're doing is your entity is going under contract with the hotel, and your entity is also going on under contract with the agency, and you're brokering that deal between the agency personnel and what hotel they're going to stay in. And that spread between the GSA rate and where you can negotiate the rooms at, that's what you keep. Okay. So it's a beautiful thing. And the thing I like about the hotels, you're not responsible for check-in and check-out. You're not responsible for housekeeping, continental breakfast, airport shuttle, none of that stuff. You collect the check once a month from the agency, you pay the hotel once a month, right? And you keep the spread. It's easy money. And those can even be 3 and 5 year deals too, right? I had a student just day before yesterday won a contract, was a 5-year hotel deal, right? So, and I love those. And then like, here's some icing on the cake just for your audience. So with the hotel deals too, you can double dip sometimes. And if it's a flagship brand, Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, IHG, one of those types of brands, there's a way where you can collect the hotel points for all of those room nights, bro. You be staying at the Marriott free for the next 5 years, right? Wow. So that's a thing. So that's hotel brokering. So that's another play as well.
No, that's legit because you're funny because what you're saying is actually effectively true. Because if you've ever been a government employee, you go stay at a hotel and they know you're a government employee, they're charging you GSA no matter what. The room rate could be $20 cheaper a night, but they're like, oh, no tax. Oh, here's your tax form. Oh, no tax. Oh, got GSA. Okay, we're gonna charge you $91 a night, no matter what. And it's like, it's funny because if you ever been on some kind of travel for the government, you'll be looking around at other hotels. You're like, shit, I could have stayed here. This one's way nicer. Like that's how they do. So that's super smart. I mean, that's you're essentially just being the middleman for the hotel and everybody. Yeah. You're basically just paying yourself for being the middleman. What I also wanted to grasp was, okay, so you got a 300 unit deal. What's the logistics of getting like the internet turned on, the electricity turned on? Like, right. You know what I mean? There's moving parts, right? And once you get them all in place, then you're straight. I get it. But what's the logistics to that? How do you get 300 units electricity turned on?
Yeah. That's it. It's no small feat. I'll say that. So that deal to date, since I've been kind of doing this in this space, is the largest one I've been a part of. And so that deal, I think initially, I'm trying to remember, we negotiated with now this was in San Diego. So if you don't know anything about San Diego inventory is very compressed. Like availability is just shot. Okay. So the 300 doors that we initially negotiated was across, I want to say like 27 or something communities. Yeah. Right. Just because it's just inventory is just shot there. And then, there were certain specific things that they wanted. They wanted in unit washer and dryer and stuff like that. Right. So once we were able to kind of ink the deal with all of these different communities, with all of these different, negotiation points and things like that, then to your point, like you said, then the logistics kick in of getting all the utilities turned on and internet and so on and so forth. And man, we learned a lot going through that process. But what I learned, one of the things I learned, so one of the first things you need to make sure you have on, you need to make sure electrical's on, number one, right? And then internet, number two, because of the lead time for these internet providers to get out and do the install. Okay. And so I think we were working with like 2 or 3 different internet providers. Right. And so the lead times were varying. And then like some of them, it wasn't looking good in terms of us like getting somebody out there and getting it set up in a timely manner. And so we elected for self-install kits where they send you the kit in a box and you set it up yourself. Huge mistake.
Hope all the wires are still hooked up from the last people.
Yes. Huge mistake. Never do that. Okay.
Yeah, because you're calling them out anyway half the time anyway. Yeah,
right, exactly. So there's that. And then that's happening on top of coordinating with the furniture rental companies to come in and drop the furniture in. And then so all the things, and then you know, depending on your internet provider, if if cable is going to be necessary, and bringing in TV service and all of that stuff, right? So so that's the really busy work part. So fortunately for us, because we've been doing this for a while, we a couple of things we had going for us. One of our partners lives in San Diego. Okay, number one, she's been in the short-term rental MTR space for almost as long as I have, so she knows what she's doing. She's ran a 70-unit building before, like she knows her stuff. So that was very, very helpful, right? Because she knew like the communities to look at. She knew the inventory. She runs in the real estate space there locally, so she had a lot of connections. So that proved to be like wildly helpful, especially for something this large. And so coordinating everything, that requires like a bit of a small team. So I don't know how many times I flew out to San Diego during that time frame. It was several. My other partner, Jeremy, he flew from the East Coast out there, several times. She was out there. We ended up, long story short, hiring an actual W-2 employee, okay, for this specific project. So we hired her. We put her up in one of the units. So part of her comp package is free rent, right? Which is not bad.
Nice in San Diego.
Yeah. And so we put her up, we pay her. She manages the relationships with all the property management companies at the different communities, right? She handles like one-off requests, because they get assigned parking, but somebody's in my parking space, And so we hired her for a full-time role for that purpose, right? And then we have a couple of like VAs and stuff that handle phone and email inquiries and things like that, right? And so so there's a lot logistically. The larger the deal gets, depending on the type of deal. If it's a multifamily type deal, they can there's a lot of moving parts. I'll say that. But with that said, once it's set up and running smoothly and fluid, it's like a well-oiled machine, right? Yeah. Everything just clicks along. And so I haven't been to San Diego. I'm actually going in a couple of weeks for a conference, but outside of that, like I haven't been related to that project for months. I don't even, outside of our meetings that we hold periodically, I don't even know what's going on, right? There was this earthquake yesterday or the day before out there. And then I get a text from the team saying everything's all good after the earthquake. I was like, what? Right. So it's very hands off after everything's up and running. And so that's good.
That's insane. I mean, it's just insane. It's like, I feel like that would be a challenge to set that stuff up. I feel like, a lot of companies, like if you're setting it up as like a business entity, right, for like, internet or something, they're going to start trying to charge you business rates, which are a lot higher than regular residential rates. And San Diego Municipal Electric is no joke, or Edison's no joke out there. I'm sure that's going to be a pretty penny for electricity. That's the largest deal. So if you were to set up for like a 10 unit, would you set up the electricity in like your business name, or would you just personal name and have them turn on every single house?
Yeah. So like even the first one we did, which was 9, we already had like that inventory we already had. And so all of that was already like in the business. It was under the entity. The other one that we went out and got the contract first, then got the doors. We set up, because we were in a rush, we set those up through our service through our individual names. And then it just kind of went from there. At the end of the day, like we know prior to bidding on a contract, we know almost down to within $10 what our profit is going to be per door every month for the duration of the contract. So we know our numbers before we even submit a bid. We know what our margins are, right? And so we're not really worried about like, how the electric's going to flex, or the gas or the heater bill or whatever, right? So we've already done the front end work on utility costs, on rental expenses, on furniture, on all the things, right? Because we have to know those numbers in order to make sure our profit margin is where it needs to be before we bid, because we got to know that top line number that we're going to bid to the agency, right? So because of that, we got to know all the expenses. And so that's another thing I like is that, you can forecast very easily with these deals, and you'll know for the long term, like what your expenses are going to look like within a very tight margin.
So one thing we didn't touch on, Noble, that I'm interested in is there has to be some kind of standards and quality before they take these units and qualify them. So how do you vet
Yeah.
like standards, quality, make sure it's something that would align with what they're looking for, right? It can't be,
Yeah. So they'll, good
slumlords
question.
kind of housing, right? It's got to be quality, right?
Yeah, good question. So they usually line out the parameters in the initial scope of work of the solicitation of the bid. And so they'll state like, okay, these units need to be within a certain radius of this particular address or whatever, however many mile radius. They'll state usually like, minimally they need an in-unit washer and dryer. They need a full-size refrigerator, like all of the basic requirements, one parking space per person, whatever the case is, right? So they'll give you all of the parameters. Okay. Now, they're typically going to grade you on three things. They're going to grade you obviously on the price because it's a bid, okay, and the price point that you pitch. They're going to grade you on your capability. They call it technical capability, but it's basically essentially your ability to provide the things that they're asking for. So you have to show them how I'm going to provide all of these things and check all these boxes, right? And then the last thing is they'll grade you based on past performance. So that's where a lot of new people get hung up because they think, well, I'm new to this. I haven't won any contracts. I don't have any past performance. That's not necessarily what they're speaking about. They're not saying you have to have government contract past performance, but do you have past performance doing the very thing that you're selling to our agency? Right. So have you housed people before? Have you done real estate related projects before? Right. Have you done this thing in the private sector before? Right. Or as a side job or whatever. Like that's the type of past performance. They want to know like you're not a fly by night mom and pop shop that just started 2 days ago and is your first time doing this thing. And now you're trying to resell it to them. Like they don't want to see that. Right. They just want to, do you have some level of experience at all in this space? And so they'll grade you on price, technical capability, and past performance. And so in within all of that, they're going to look at the best value for the agency, right? So they're going to take all those things in consideration, look at the best value for the agency. Well, if you think about it, agency personnel, those decision makers, they're just not, they're no different than you or I. Like when people are looking for a place to purchase a house, rent a place to stay, vacation, whatever, it's location, location, location. It's quality. Nobody wants to stay in the hood. Nobody wants to stay in a Class C rundown property unless they just absolutely don't have a choice, right? But preference wise, nobody wants to do that. And so the agencies are no different. So they're not going to really be looking at Class C inventory. Like they're not going to put their people up in Class C inventory. It's not going to happen, right? They'll look at Class B and Class A, but then, is it sitting next to a liquor store? They're not putting their people up there. You know what I'm saying? So they have similar requirements like the rest of the civilian world would have, right? In terms of what they're looking for, quality wise, right? And location wise and so on and so forth. And so they take those things into consideration when they're determining who to award these contracts to.
Okay, yeah, that clarifies things and that makes a lot more sense. So they do have some kind of vetting kind of system on how it works. So I get that. I want to pivot
And
for a sec. Go ahead.
real quick, one more point.
No, go for
They
it.
will do a walkthrough inspection of the property. Okay. And they will do that prior to you signing the lease with the property. So they'll say, we like these. Sometimes they'll do it before they award it. So sometimes they'll pick a finalist list and say, we're going to look at these 3 companies and their properties that they select, and we're going to go walk the inventory of these properties. Okay. And then they'll decide which ones they want to eliminate and which ones they like. And then they'll keep you in the finalist category. Sometimes they'll award you the contract and then say, out of everything you pitched to us, whatever kind of, passes muster, like we'll take. So if you pitched us 50, but only 35 pass muster, we'll take that 35, but we're going to go walk them first. Right. And so they will go out and walk the property. So I want to make that point.
Yeah, so let's say those 15. So you went to the landlord and you negotiated 50, but now you're only booking 35 of them. What do you do with those 15? Is that where the relationships come into play and you're kind of like, you got to work that out with the landlord and say, hey, it's only going to be 35 after all. Can you lease these back out or whatever? How's that work?
Yeah, exactly. So some of that conversation is had on the front end when we're kind of just educating them on the opportunity and their interest in partnering with us in this particular opportunity. And so, we'll let them know, like at the end of the day, the final decision is made by the agency personnel, by the contracting team. They'll want to do a walkthrough. For something like that, depending on how how big it is, that may be the one opportunity where you fly across country and go on site for a walkthrough, right? But outside of that, the community is pretty aware. Like these are the stipulations, before we even get that far.
Sure, that makes sense. But I did want to pivot into one thing. You mentioned that you have partners in this deal. Did you start out with partners from the beginning, or did you get them along the way? And how has that kind of been rocket fuel for your business? Because I know a lot of people that listen to the show, they may be managing 10 or 15 units. Maybe they're interested in partnering. How has partnerships played out for you?
Yeah, man. Good question. So this particular deal, I came across this deal, and it was one of my first students that I suggested to him, "Hey, you need to go after this deal." And so so he ended up going after it, and in the process of that, he engaged me to partner with him on it, because I originally didn't have any intention of being involved in it. And so he engaged me to partner with it on it. And then we ran the numbers and stuff, and we were looking at three of us being involved, and everything makes sense. And the cash flow was off the chart. So we were like, yeah, why not? And so I was actually kind of invited into the deal by a former student. And so I rarely partner on deals. Okay. So for the longest, I've had one single requirement for people that wanted to partner with me. And that was that they had to have closed at least one contract themselves, right? Because that would prevent me from being in a situation effectively where I'm training as we go, right? Right, which isn't ideal. And so if you met that requirement and then the deal made sense, right, and there was enough meat on the bone for both of us, then I would be open to considering partnering. So that was in place for the longest. More recently, I've changed that a little bit, as I've engaged in a couple of partnership deals whereby I will consider someone, even if they haven't won a deal, but they'll do it under a situation where I'm providing mentorship as I partner with them on going after the opportunity. And that is in a paid transaction. So it's more of a mentorship done with you type of transaction, if you will. So outside of that, I don't partner that often. And then the deal has to meet like certain requirements for me to do it. But I will say this: for people that are new, or they don't meet all the boxes they feel like to be able to qualify to win one by themselves, partnering can be huge. Like two companies can partner together, leverage their collective resources, go after an opportunity. That can be very helpful. So I definitely recommend partnering when it makes sense.
So speaking of, your coaching and mentorship, if somebody wanted to get involved with you and learn how to get these contracts themselves and those kinds of stuff, where would they go, or how would they get a hold of you to do that? So
the easiest place is either Instagram. I'm always on Instagram. My Instagram handle is noble.crawford.3. So noble.crawford.3, or my website, noblecrawford.com. Either one of those two is the best way to kind of like hit me up.
You couldn't get the handle, but you can get the website. I know how you feel.
I know, right?
I was going to say, you care to share any of any success stories for some of the members in your group? So you have somebody that came in and really kicked ass and learned your ways and committed to it. And tell me a little about that.
Gosh. Oh, where do I start? Okay. So I've only been coaching for like 2.5 years now. Right at 2.5 years, I think. My first biggest success student, the first one, which is now my partner in San Diego, does this gentleman named Jeremy. So he won a multi-7-figure deal out in Alabama, and of all places, people think like Alabama. And so what it was the ATF, I believe it was sending people down to the military base down there to do weapons training on rotation, kind of similar to mine, on rotation, and it's a 5-year deal. So the contract comes out, and it's initially for hotels. And so I tell them, I said, okay, so we're going to pitch hotels. And that's when I taught them the hotel brokering model. I said, but we're also going to pitch multifamily, because I understand like you get more for your money with multifamily, right? All things being equal. And so, so we ended up pitching the hotels, but we pitched multifamily as an option. Okay. And so they circled back around to him. Long story short, he won that contract because he pitched something different that they liked more than any other vendor. Than any other vendors. And so he got both 75 doors of multifamily and he got 150 doors of multifamily between 2 Marriott properties. So it was a stupid contract. And that was his first one. And he won it in less than 6 months from start to finish. Right. So so that was a good one. I've had students that have won single family VA deals. And by the way, Jeremy's probably, I don't know, 5-6 wins in now on contract awards. So he's done like tens of millions of dollars at this point. But I've had students win VA deals that were 7-figure deals that were literally like 13 bodies, right? That needed housing like 3 weeks out of the month on a 5-year contract, right? So at a GSA nightly rate, right? And so those are lucrative. I've had, a couple, a group I'm working with 2 days ago that won a hotel deal. It was a 5-year deal, right? And it was for a National Reserve unit. So it was a reserve unit. When they go do their drill weekends once a month, they need a place to stay. And so it was a 5-year deal where once a month, every weekend, they're going to house like 300 some people, check in Friday, check out Sunday scenario, right? And so that one is like a low 7-figure deal, right? And there's like countless, and they're small ones. They're small deals. They're small, like what are called yellow ribbon events. So if you're in Sam searching, you'll see something called yellow ribbon events. Those are hotel deals, but those are hotel deals that require rooms, that require conference space, food and beverage, and AV equipment, right? Because they're more event and conference based. But if you know how to broker hotel rooms, you can also broker the other ancillary stuff, right? And so because it's all the same, at the end of the day, you're going to get a quote from the hotel, you're going to mark it up, you're going to bid it back to the government. Okay. And so like you can, those are all day long. Right. And then everything in between. And so, yeah, it's a myriad of students that win various types of contracts. We talk for a while about that.
I feel like we could go for a while. I mean, there's so many creative ways to make money. Like you've blown my mind. Honestly, you really have. Yeah, that's crazy. The whole thing is crazy. I might register my business tonight, just to check it out, just to browse through them. Yeah, I mean, I did have one other question. I know that we got to wrap, but if my house is in a vacation rental market, can I get a contract there too?
Usually, likely not.
Just for others.
Just because the nature of what the government is looking for, it's not vacation rental location specific. You got a house in the Smokies, you got a house in Broken Bow property, a nice one. I will say that's not impossible because the U.S. Forest Service gets use properties like that. Army Corps of Engineers, they'll use properties like that. So there are those smaller agencies that have those little one-off deals where they're looking for properties like that to house their people, but they're few and far between, right? So I'm not saying you can't get one, but it's just not common. I'll say that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Austin. So you told everybody where to find you. Anywhere else? Anything else you want to let everybody know?
I mean, that's about it, really. Like, if they're interested in what I'm doing, you just follow me on Instagram. I'm usually I'll post every so often there. If you're interested in working with me, there's information on my website about that, or you can just shoot me a DM. Other than that, I'm usually try to make my rounds at the different STR, MTR speaking engagements. So sometimes I'll pop up at some of those. I got one coming up in San Diego, a Jesse Vasquez event here in a couple of weeks. So I'll be out there. Feel free to say hi if you're there. Other than that, man, I appreciate y'all having me.
When you talk to him, tell him to get on the podcast. I've been DMing him, but
Okay.
Yeah, I think we like to have the person in every single niche that we think of when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I don't know anyone else doing this. Like, you are the face of this, you're owning this category in this niche. So man, that was so much value. And I just appreciate you coming on and sharing that. Like, I didn't know any of that stuff. Like I thought you lived in San Antonio and you worked on the bases. I didn't know what you did, but now I'm like, dude, this was fire, man. Thanks for coming on and dropping some game. I know a lot of people are going to get value out of this.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate y'all.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it again. All right. Well, Austin, let it go.
All right. Thank y'all for listening. Peace.